Hello, and welcome to the Thinking Elixir podcast, where we cover the news of the community and learn from each other. My name is Mark Erickson.
And I'm David Bernheisel.
Let's jump into the news. First up, the big news today is that Oban Web has officially been released as open source. So tail end of last year, it was shared and announced that this is the intention, that this is going to happen. Well, it actually has happened now. So this big release actually includes, it's like 3 releases. This includes Oban version 2.19, and that's bringing with it MySQL support. And I saw so there's an associated blog post that really digs into all of this. Totally worth checking out, especially if you're a customer and you've been paying for this service. It gives you more insights about what the path forward is for all this.
Yeah.
But with MySQL, I saw that they've also done a lot of testing on PlanetScale, which is a, professionally hosted and distributed MySQL database. So that's great. It's like they've already validated that this is going to work there. So that gives a lot of people, that comfort where they can just check that off. So this release includes Oban 2.19 with MySQL support, Oban Web, it's 2.11, which is the one that's now freely available. And there's a new library that was released as part of this called MET. And that is the underlying library that collects metrics and builds some of the visualizations for Oban Web, like the charts. And Parker and Shannon, they said that really Oban Web isn't anything without MET. That's so much a core of what it is. So it kind of had to come along with it. But that's really cool, So you can get this other package to get access to all these different metrics out of your Oban system.
Yeah. If you're an Oban Pro customer, Oban Met's probably not new to you because you've been drawing it in anyway just to get Oban Web up and working. But yes, Oban Web and Oban Met are kind of a two for one deal here. You're going to need it. I don't imagine Oban Met would be helpful for, anything outside of Oban Web, but that's the nature of how they divided it up, which is nice. But yeah, it's pretty exciting. So you can imagine the big Ecto adapters out there, the official ones are all Postgres, MySQL, and SQLite. And now Oban also supports all 3 of those big engines. So no worries. I know Oban is tested with auto-distributed Postgres flavor, right? That kind of like PlanetScale is for MySQL. So that's pretty nice. And I reckon there are flavors of SQLite as well, but that's kind of different, right? It's file-based, and the point of it is to be close to your app. This is fantastic. I'm really happy about that. I think a lot of folks will be super happy about that. I know that was a common critique of Oban is well, I can do the job in queuing thing and I can manually query, my jobs in my database, but man, I really wish I could just view my queue or something. That's where you'd have to start investigating a license with them, which is, I think, still, even today, even though it's now open source, I still think that amount of work deserves support, because that's a lot of work. And so if you still want to support Oban, which you ought to, Oban Pro is still a paid thing, which includes a lot of more complicated workflows, batching, job. I don't know. You can kind of pair it with the generic cloud of enterprise workings. If you need any of those enterprisey kinds of features for processing jobs, Oban Pro is definitely it, and it's definitely worth it. It's definitely cheaper than hiring engineers to do it on your own. So I highly recommend it. So very happy to see this. All right, next up, ElixirConf 2024 videos. More videos are being published. I actually helped make some of these posters, so it's kind of nifty. So if they look bad, you can blame me. But we got a couple of links to the YouTube playlist, which has it. The ElixirConf YouTube handle also typically will list it most current on top. So if you just go there, you'll check out what's been most recently posted. Some of the new ones are Phoenix Unplugged, uncovering the magic of plugs. There's another one that's about data processing without dependencies, which is pretty nice. Looks like we have a couple typos in YouTube there. I'll let I'll let Jim know. Using Neural Profit, NX, and Livebook to forecast business data in Elixir. Why the world needs PhoenixTest, which I agree. Definitely watch that one. That's from Herman Velasco. And then let's see, several other ones. Set theoretic types, the theory and the practice. securing the future with good friend Holden Ouellette, the roadmap to making Elixir the safest language. We've got Hugo Barauna talking about using Livebook to build and deploy internal tools. And I'm sure many more to come. But check out the playlist on YouTube and go watch a couple. They were all fantastic. So I can't really even point to one that you got to listen to because they were all pretty good in their own right, their own little domain. But yeah, nice to see the flow of ElixirConf videos being released has officially commenced. So we'll have more, I'm sure, by the time you even listen to the episode.
Yeah, maybe the last one will be released right as ElixirConf 2025 is about to launch.
Hopefully it won't take that long.
All right, and next up, we learned about a new Elixir web framework called Hologram. So this was news to me, and I thought this was really interesting. So it's described as full stack isomorphic Elixir web framework, which means, I'm like, what does that mean? Well, yeah, you have to read a little bit further in the GitHub project to understand. It says, build rich interactive UIs entirely in Elixir using Hologram's declarative component system. So they've got their own component system. And then your client-side code is intelligently transpiled to JavaScript, providing modern front-end capabilities without relying on any JavaScript frameworks. It's very early, right? This is version 0.
That sounds crazy.
It does sound crazy. So this is still very early. This is release 0.2.0, and that just happened. So it's something interesting to watch. Some of the initial experiences of people playing with it, we're having some issues, maybe some performance stuff that still needs to get worked out, but it's a very interesting idea. And if you look at the getting started and some of the architecture documentation, you start to see, this is like macro heavy in terms of how they're building these components. You're building, it looked like you were building the routes directly into the component page as opposed to having a separate routes file. So it's very different. It's a whole unique take on this, which I totally enjoy the idea. The project credits a number of different sources of inspiration for this idea, including LiveView, Surface, Ruby on Rails, and other things. So it's really interesting. I love seeing when people really play with stuff like this, kind of challenge and take a whole new approach to something, just because sometimes great ideas come out of it, even if that's not the thing that gets adopted. Right? That's what Surface was. Surface was this idea that Marlis Saraiva really pushed forward and really advocated for and made an excellent case for. Those got adopted into Phoenix.
That's like Heeks, for example.
Exactly. Yeah. So I love seeing this. I don't know where this is going to go, but it's certainly something interesting to watch.
Here's a piece from their website here. It says, Hologram automatically analyzes your code and determine which parts should run on the client versus the server. What? That's what number one. Converts necessary Elixir code into JavaScript for browser execution. That's what number two. Holy crap. And then number three sets up all the required client-server communication. That's probably just LiveView underneath. If I had to guess, maybe they're doing something custom. But what and what? You're doing what to my Elixir code? You're converting it to JavaScript? I didn't realize that was really possible. By the way, I think that's what they mean by the word isometric, the process of transpiling it to a different language. But you write Elixir. Yeah, I wonder how they determine which parts should run on the client versus the server. Because I think I'm going to attribute it incorrectly, but let's just call it Vercel and React.
Oh, yeah.
Because they just did something like that where you, what is it, like @use server or something in a particular function or component in your JavaScript code. And so you mark it and you say, this is supposed to be server side. Yeah. I guess compiles, it's always got the server available there. Apparently that's how that stuff works. And then it serves to hydrate the front end side of the code. So you'd put in your database query kind of stuff on the server side, but you still have to mark your modules with use server, I think. I might have the syntax wrong. Anyway, the idea is similar. So these guys, Hologram, were like, we're going to figure that out on our own without having to bother you about it. So I'm going to be watching this. This is pretty cool.
They may pull this off. For all I know, right?
Or
but
not.
The first things that come to mind is sometimes you explicitly want control about what is server side and what is client side, especially when it comes down to, key business logic and maybe permissions checks and things like that. It's like, I don't want that being on the client. because people can futz with it then. And then you're also in this situation of, well, if it's all being transpiled and I don't see how any of that's happening, if I do have a bug, how do I debug it? Because it might be a bug in the transpiler. So like the JavaScript code that comes out, it's like, oh, because I wrote my Elixir code this particular way, it comes out this funny way and causes these other weird problems. So things like that, I'm like, just kind of like makes me a little cautious, but still very interested.
So maybe I'm thinking this is a bigger thing than it really is, but one of the problem spaces, like, so in LiveView, when you assign something to the socket, that state that lives there on that process that's serving that page, you know, for that person, one of the problem areas has been, how do you do the same thing but on the JavaScript side that's just like UI centered state, right? So we have the Phoenix JS commands that you can kind of like load on the server, on the client side, and then you have like events that would essentially execute that little bit of logic that's been serialized and sent over there. That happens at page load, so it's just available, just not executed, and then the events would execute it. But there's still like an implicit state somewhere on that on that client side, and that's been a gap, I think, that some people have talked about, that there's not a way in your live view to say, this variable is client-side state. Now, there's some approaches to solving that. I think there's actually a project called Live State that tries to make it a common API, I think. That's not part of LiveView, but that's one approach to it. You've also got web components, which also has a kind of state inside of itself. The HTML like RFC of web components that Angular 20 years ago really tried to like hinge their whole experience on, that is just now, I feel like, coming around to being more accepted because React kind of like disrupted that whole thing. All right. Anyway, Hologram seems very, very impressive. Still very early. Most of the docs say coming soon. So buyer beware, I guess. But this seems very ambitious, and I'm very excited about it.
I think one thing that's worth thinking about is if this is a topic that you think is interesting, you're like, wow, I really like the idea of playing with this, getting involved in the project, this is maybe a good time to do that, where there's still a lot of work to be done, a lot of things to be figured out. I don't know that they're totally open to collaboration, but you know, it might be worth reaching out if this sounds like something interesting to you.
Whew, well, all right. Well, coming off of that, let's talk about what comes up next. We got PhoenixTest. We love PhoenixTest here. We love Herman Velasco as well. PhoenixTest, if you haven't heard about it, it is a common API that allows you to test Phoenix live views and Phoenix dead views with the same assertions. So Phoenix ships out of the box with a bunch of assertions, but they're a little different between dead views and live views. And so that's the gap that PhoenixTest covers today. And one of the things that it doesn't cover out of the box is integration tests, like with a full-on browser and JavaScript execution and all that kind of stuff. In the JavaScript world, there's a modern way of controlling browsers, which has always been iffy. You know, capybara, Selenium drivers, that kind of stuff. It's like they were creating the standards while they were trying to use it. You know, building the airplane while it's trying to fly, kind of a thing, right? So Playwright, I think, is now in a position to, if I recall correctly, it's kind of homegrown by Google anyway for Chrome. And then it's also a standard for everyone else because Google rules the internet world. I guess they can do that. Anyway, so Playwright is kind of true or not. It's kind of the most consistent and stable way to communicate with browsers to drive them. And so we have a lot of those today that are basically Selenium driven, like Wallaby today is Selenium driven, I believe. And now somebody else, I can't pronounce their name, but somebody else has created a library that plugs into PhoenixTest that wraps up the Playwright JavaScript's CLI, I guess, to use Playwright. So you can theoretically now today, friend of the show, Tyler also has tested this and merged it into his main branch of, you know, whatever he's working on. So he's got confidence here. But there is now a driver for PhoenixTest to use Playwright, meaning that PhoenixTest has a common API now for doing all layers of like web testing, dead views, live views, and full-on like integration testing now, which is pretty incredible to say. That's pretty darn incredible. that's really nice. It was just released, so maybe not entirely stable, but then on the other hand, for the most part, I think it's just forwarding on to the JavaScript library. So you'll have a little JavaScript asset pipeline thing going on there to make that run, but it's test only. I guess who cares? So anyway, very interesting. If you're thinking about adopting a test library for your new app, or you want to go through the pain and suffering of rewriting all your tests that you currently have in your test in your app, PhoenixTest seems like a very solid common API nowadays. And I'm going to say it again, PhoenixTest needs to be merged into Phoenix. But it seems like a very cool place to be right now. So very happy to see that. We'll see what happens in the long term for Playwright drivers in PhoenixTest proper. But for now, it is a separate hex library for it to be evolved separately, which is pretty nifty. So go check it out. We got a link to the library.
And next up, Protoss is a library by Isaac Yamamoto. And Isaac recently announced that Protoss is now feature complete and moving to 1.0. We haven't talked about Protoss in a long time. So if you're not familiar with what this is, to quote from the GitHub project, it describes it so, I love this, it's evil and powerful protocols for Elixir. I love it. Like, he just owns it, right? It's like, you can do some really gnarly stuff with this if you are so inclined. And so the way he describes it further on the GitHub page is protocols are just modules. And sometimes you just want to do module things in protocols. And when you're in control of both the protocol and the module you're implementing for, co-locating the code in the module you're writing just makes sense. This library automatically does that for you. So he is looking now for a maintainer to help ensure that the library works correctly for all the new Elixir versions moving forward. So if you're currently a user of Protoss, or you are interested in this and want to get involved as, helping to maintain the project, it's considered stable, but just helping to maintain it as Elixir continues to evolve, then certainly want to check that out. Just a reminder, if you're interested in protocols, right? So if you're doing a protocol that's defined by enum, you don't control both ends of the protocol. But if it's a protocol for your own code where you control the code that's implementing the protocol and the code that the protocol uses, if you control both ends, then this is where you can really start to do some unique stuff. And evil. It's evil stuff if you want to be evil.
Isaac is self-proclaimed, and I agree, the pirate of the Elixir community. So I love it. I also love that it's called Protoss. That's a callback to StarCraft. I had some good old StarCraft days. It was, oh my gosh, that's 1997. That's has it been a while? Really? Now I'm old. All right. Hey, next up, we got Ash. We got a lot of Ash news, so we'll kind of speed around this one. The Ash is on a tear, and keeping up with it can kind of be tough, even for me. So they have introduced a new Ash weekly newsletter. So we've got a link to that, so that can land in your inbox. They also have it up on Substack, so we'll have a link to that as well. And they'll collect all the things that they're doing, which is probably really helpful if you are in the Ash ecosystem, because you'll want to know all the new capabilities of all of its myriad of projects that they maintain. So that's one thing. So that's a new weekly newsletter. Another thing is Ash has a new installer script that's kind of, I think it's accurate to say, I think it's mostly powered by Igniter, which is a related project to them. It's not dependent on Ash. It's just very helpful for Ash. Lots of things are actually using Igniter. In fact, we talked about Oban earlier today. Oban also, in their announcement post, they have examples using Igniter of how to add or create a new project with Oban. We won't get into it today, but we've talked a lot on the show about generators with Phoenix, and it's hard. It's a hard problem. The composability is kind of the effort here that Igniter is trying to accomplish. And so Igniter will generate a Phoenix project for you if you need a new one, or take your existing one and then compose all of these other scripts on top of it to modify source files. And so Oban has created their own to install itself, by default with all of its defaults into your application or your brand new application. And Ash on their own, also has an installer script that will also leverage all of these Igniter things. So there's all sorts of combinations of what Ash can support. They've got adapters for JSON API, GraphQL APIs. a bunch of different data layers such as Postgres or CSV.
Nice.
Yeah, I haven't thought about running an app off of a CSV, but it's possible. Authentication methods. There's just so much that Ash actually handles. So Igniter and this install script should make it easy to like kind of ask you all those questions up front. I kind of see it like the Phoenix new generator. But being powered by Igniter just makes it also applicable for existing projects, which is really, really helpful. So I really hope that this approach takes off like as the default for the community, because we do need that problem solved for composable, libraries to like install themselves easily into your existing application. So that's really nice. Yeah. So their installer will kind of collect all these things for you and give you a quick like I think it's one-liner, if you don't count the new lines in there to make it readable. So that's pretty cool. And then, all right, last up on the little Ash roundups is that this is actually a couple of weeks old. I just found it again. But Ash Phoenix was updated to have better handling around nested form. I bring that up because nested forms are never fun to deal with. And so the fact that they made it easier, and from what I understand from it, it's working along the same lines that Phoenix Live View does, just on its own. Phoenix, by the way, has a Phoenix_ecto library that is the bindings between Phoenix and just normal ecto, in particular about forms. And so if you have a bunch of associations you're trying to add or reorder or delete, all of that is about nestedness. And so Ash Phoenix is now updated as well to handle nested, associations like that. I presume associate. Maybe it can be anything, but anyway, so go check that out. If you're using Ash, you need to go check out Ash Phoenix and maybe update to the latest version to make things a little easier for you in the long run. That concludes the Ash news roundup for today. And future episodes of this will be written by Ash Weekly. So go check out that newsletter. I'll subscribe to that too. So I'll pick out some of the big items out of that, and we'll repeat them here for their sake. But yeah, if you're an Ash user, go sign up for that Ash Weekly newsletter.
And next up, moving into conferences. So Codebeam Lite Stockholm conference is making their call for speakers. So the call for speakers is open until February 20th, and the conference itself will be June 2nd in 2025, of course, in Stockholm, Sweden. It's a one-day, one-track, in-person conference. So if you're in the neighborhood and you want to speak, now's the time to put your name in the hat. And June will be a beautiful time to visit Sweden. So if that's on your bucket list, now you have a great excuse to go.
Speaking of Sweden, I wasn't planning on talking about this, but that just reminded me that Goatmire is also in Sweden. And I know I'm saying this wrong, but I'm just going to say it like a plain old American, but in Varberg, Sweden, from September 10th through the 12th. So yes, also a good time to be in Sweden, I think. It's probably even a little warmer at that point in time. So if you don't recall us talking about Goatmire, it's single track. It's helped led by Lars Wikman over there, a good friend of the show and popular Elixirist over there, especially in Europe. Good guy. And I hear they're going to have a goat. I might be making promises on their behalf, but with a name like Goatmire, better be a goat there. At least a picture of one. Okay.
A cardboard cutout that you can pose with.
Yeah, a cardboard cutout. That'd be great. But in all seriousness, I do this every single time. I can't get over the name. I love it. So good hook, Lars. I love the name Goatmire. But in all seriousness, the location is actually very beautiful. It is not out in the field of farm animals. It's in a very beautiful theater. Okay. But back in the U.S., there's another conference coming up called GigCityElixir. You may have heard of it before. It's going to be held in Chattanooga, Tennessee this year. I want to say it was held there before as well.
So they said it's going to be again in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So I don't know how many times it's been there, but yeah.
I think it's always been there.
Maybe.
Could be wrong. But they have a website, it's GigCityElixir.com. They partnered up with NervesConf, just like they did with Goatmire in Sweden. So NervesConf EU is partnered with Goatmire. NervesConf US is partnered with GigCityElixir. NervesConf will be on May 8th. The GigCityElixir part of that will be just following it from the 9th to the 10th. So the call for speakers and sponsors is open. So we'll have a link to the conference website in the show notes. You should go check that out. If you're thinking about giving a talk, good local conferences like GigCityElixir is like a great place to go. It's much more small scale, which in my opinion, that's really good. From the time I went to Codebeam Lite in New York City, it's one track, it's single room, it's lovely. You get to talk to everybody. I haven't been to GigCityElixir myself. I'd love to get over there though, but I bet it would be along the same kinds of feels, over there. Mm-hmm. So go there, get that smaller setting, I think, and meet everybody as much as you can. It's a much more intimate, conference there, so you can make a lot of long-lasting friendships there, I bet. But if you're thinking about speaking, they would love to hear from you. So go check out GigCityElixir.com, and I'm sure you'll find more info there.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening. We hope you'll join us next time on Thinking Elixir.